The New Democratic Party has long been respectful of its leaders. Losing an election was never reason to remove them from the top spot. But this weekend's policy convention and leadership review in Edmonton may reveal a new, more impatient face of the NDP. How does the leader himself contend with the situation? Let's ask him. In Ottawa, Tom Mulcair, leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada and the MP for Outremont. And Mr. Mulcair, we're happy to have you on TVO again. How goes the battle?
Good to be with you, Steve. Well, I don't know what the battle is, but I can tell you I'm heartened by what I've been seeing since the election. For the past 6 months, I've traveled tirelessly across the country, meeting with the membership base. Been a fantastic experience. It's rare that a party leader gets to sit down with the individual candidate and very small groups of 5 or 6 people, but I've done that literally dozens of times. And I've met with larger groups as well, but overall it's mirrored what outgoing party president Rebecca Blakey has done across the country, and that's learn the lessons of the last campaign so that we can fix things and apply those lessons going forward. And it's been heartening for me to know the level of support that I enjoy, but I'm not taking anything for granted. And our membership base is impatient for us to be able to continue offering that very positive view of what we can accomplish to make Canada a more fair place for more Canadians.
Well, it is your first visit here since the election, so to that end, let's look back, and then at the end, we'll look forward. You and I both know John F. Kennedy once said that defeat is an orphan and victory has 1,000 fathers. So I wonder how much of an orphan you're feeling like over the past several months.
Well, you know, I don't think that there's any other way for a political leader to accept this type of situation other than to tell the membership base clearly that it's on my shoulders. And that's what I've said literally since day one. It is on my shoulders, because even if there was a problem with somebody else in their sphere of responsibility, I'm the person who put that other person there, and I'm responsible for the result. I've never shied away from that. And I think that the membership has respected the fact that I've been clear on that since the beginning. Beyond that, I also know that there are a lot of incredible people both in the party here in Ottawa, in our caucus, but frankly, what I've got a more impressed opinion of than ever before is the depth of our grassroots at the riding level across the country. And frankly, Steve, the number one thing that I would change and what I plan to do going forward, I have to make sure the parliamentary wing, if you can use that expression, everyone's given us good marks in terms of our performance in the House, and the party apparatus itself, as well as the riding associations, work more in lockstep than ever before. That's the number one challenge. I've met so many deeply talented and experienced people, and they were so frustrated. They were hitting up against a wall very often when they would try to communicate with Ottawa. It's my job to open up the doors, open up the windows, let those people in. And we're only going to be helping ourselves if we tap into that rich pool of talent across the country.
Well, your party did do an exhaustive postmortem on the election campaign, and one of the things that it did say, you're quite right, was members felt that the reporting from the ground had no effect on the strategic decision-making happening in the central campaign, meaning that the leadership was not responsive to the voices of the grassroots or from below. And if I infer properly from your last answer, sounds like you agree that that was a problem, yes?
I read Rebecca Blakey's report, and I had a big smile on my face, because the type of thing that you just read was in there, and that's exactly what I sensed and felt as I went across the country. I met great people, and they were telling me some very simple ABCs of organizing that we had gotten wrong. How long we took to get nominations done so that we could have a candidate in place well before the election to give them a fighting chance, to do some fundraising, to get known in their communities, attend bake sales, go to church basements. I mean, these are basic things, and we were naming people after the writ drop. How long it took for us to vet candidates. Again, this is more important today in the era of social media than ever before, but people were extraordinarily frustrated at how long it took. So those are a couple of examples, Steve, at that level. But beyond that, sometimes Ottawa, the central campaign, would be imposing themes and ad campaigns in parts of the country where they just did not work. And we have to be more responsive and have a much better ear for local campaigns. In the places like Vancouver Island, where we allowed the local candidates much more free rein, they were allowed to develop a local campaign. They seemed to do it without anybody else worrying about it. You know what? we swept Vancouver Island. We've got 6 NDP MPs. We got rid of all the Conservatives on Vancouver Island. Well, that's the type of result I want. So let's just put it this way. I want the orange wave to start in the Pacific next time and work its way across Canada that way.
I hear what you're saying, and let me put a bit of a contrarian position on the record here, because I did go to numerous events of yours in Southern Ontario during the 2015 election campaign, and I have to tell you, the events were always packed. In some cases, they were lined up outside to get in. There was a great deal of enthusiasm. I talked to party stalwarts and even some who were deeply ideological, that part of the NDP's base, who said, you know, we may not agree with everything he's putting forward, but holy cow, look around. Can you believe this enthusiasm? And at the time, the polls were basically 30-30-30 with you, the Liberals, and the Conservatives. Is it possible that this was a case of you're not necessarily having done anything horribly wrong? The other guys were just better and they just took it from you. Is that possible?
Sure. I mean, that's all part of the analysis that has to be done. And in Southern Ontario, I mean, where I've got a new colleague like Tracy Ramsey in the Essex riding, I mean, that's the type of person we were able to add to our team. And that's why I'm proud of the fact that of the 44 members of Parliament, we have 16 new MPs. But beyond that, we knew that we had great attendance at our rallies, but very often the news that night wouldn't report all rallies. So as part of that overall effort, we've got to refine our techniques for communication. You were right also to simply point out that we fell short in the campaign. As one wag put it early on, it was a campaign twice as long as any other, and we won the first half, but that's not quite enough. We want to make sure next time we complete the deal with Canadians. But having done what we did, and I know you followed this well, but you know that 10 years ago, Jack Layton came to me and said, help me build the NDP in Quebec. Up until that time, we had never won a single NDP seat in Quebec in a federal general election. And I'm really proud that I've now been elected for the 4th time in a row for the NDP in Quebec. And we have 16 NDP MPs from Quebec. So we're missing really important parts of the map, in particular Toronto. I mean, it took us a long time to build those seats up. We still have 7 strong MPs in Ontario, but I'm going to make it a top priority to fight to get those seats back in Toronto. A couple of other gaps in our map, Atlantic Canada, everybody got wiped out there by a 65-foot wave, but we've got to fight. We missed some incredible opportunities there. We lost people of the strength of Megan Leslie and Jack Harris and Robert Chisholm and Peter Stauffer. I mean, that is, frankly, a tragedy for the party, and we've got to get those back. Quebec City was also a tough problem, but there were some heartening things, like the example I gave for Vancouver Island, or winning our first Saskatchewan seats in 5 general elections. So, yeah, there are things during the campaign that could have been improved upon, and the result will be there if we learn those lessons and we apply them going forward.
I wouldn't call Rex Murphy a card-carrying New Democrat, but he did write the following in the National Post, which is, Mulcair is sober, he is staid, he is glitters antimatter. And I wonder, having run into, you know, say what you want about Justin Trudeau's weaknesses, he was Mr. Personality in the campaign. What have you learned about the power of personality during political election campaigns?
Well, what I've especially learned is to make sure that I respect every one of the adversaries that I'm going to come up against in any future campaign. And I've tried to do that in the past. And with regard to any other political leader in the spectrum right now, everybody brings their own experience and their own background to the game. I mean, I come from a very large family, very modest roots. I've worked hard all my life, and I know what it is to be a part of a family that's struggling, because I've been there. So when I talk about job losses because of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it's something very real to me. I know what that's about. And I'm going to continue to be that person. I've fought on social justice issues since I was a teenager. And I've never let go. I worked in charities in Montreal before being elected, but I've always stood up strongly, Steve, on questions of principle. I mean, when I was the head of a large regulatory agency, I took a strong stand against the licensing board for doctors in the province of Quebec that wasn't doing its job of protecting victims of sexual abuse. It was a very tough public debate, and I was young, but I stood up against those powerful interests. I did the same thing when I resigned from cabinet on a question of principle, when I refused to sign an order in council that would have transferred land in a provincial park to private developers to build condos.
This
I
was
said
the
it was
provincial
illegal. I
cabinet in
refused
Quebec.
to sign. Yeah, and that's why I quit. I mean, so these are things, this is the type of fight that I enjoy. I don't shy away from the tough things. So working for the future, working with this extraordinary movement that is the NDP. I wouldn't have it any other way than our way of going to a convention, every single convention. It's not just after an election. Every single convention, I know you know this, but just to mention it, the NDP leader faces a vote where the membership decides alone whether or not there's going to be a leadership race. And you know what? I love it because I only serve at the will of the members, and it's up to me to continue the hard work of garnering and maintaining their support. I don't shy away from that for one instant.
Let's look at a couple of other jurisdictions, though, as we continue to peruse this issue. And one notes across the pond that the British Labour Party chose Jeremy Corbyn to be its leader. He was the most left-wing candidate on offer. We see what Bernie Sanders is doing in the United States right now. I think if you and I were having a beer a year ago and I suggested to you that a democratic socialist 74-year-old Jewish guy from Brooklyn, New York would be, giving the Clinton machine a run for its money the way he is, you and I both would have found that hard to believe. I guess the question is, there's clearly a wave out there that the NDP used to represent and perhaps no longer does. And is that a wave that you guys could have caught but missed?
Well, to be fair, if you look at Rebecca Blakey's report, she reminds everyone that our progressive offer included new universal social programs like childcare, like pharmacare. We're also the only party that was talking about getting Canada's chartered banks and profitable corporations to finally start paying their fair share of taxes. So we were the only ones saying we would go after tax loopholes like the CEO stock option loophole that Mr. Trudeau said he was going to get rid of as well. He mimicked our campaign promise, but he didn't do it, and he shows no intention of doing it. So people know that about the NDP. When we talk about doing these tough things, we're actually going to do it. A lot of the things that are new for Americans, talking about a parental leave in the case of a birth of a child, well, these are things that we've had for some time in Canada, like universal free medical care, which I'm proud to remind you, and I know you know, was something that Tommy Douglas brought in Canada. It's his model out of Saskatchewan that we're all so proud of today. So we're going to continue to be that party with this vision of reducing inequality in our society, creating opportunity, and we think that universal social programs, when you look at the fact that in downtown Toronto, it's still $2,000 per month today for an infant in childcare, we think that that's ridiculous, and it's not only bad for families, it's bad for the economy. And we wanted to act on that. We'll get a chance to do it next time.
Let's see how far, though, you are prepared to go with the boldness of your vision looking forward. You know about this LEAP Manifesto, which came out during the campaign and which some people think ought to be a part of the discussion at your convention in Edmonton. Pretty bold vision of an ecologically sound society where, quote, caring for one another and caring for the planet could be the economy's fastest growing sectors. Do you see the LEAP Manifesto as part of a future NDP election platform?
Well, you're right, Steve. It did come out right in the middle of the election campaign, and it's a shame it hadn't come out a little bit earlier. We might have had a little bit more time to discuss it and debate it, as we're finally going to get a chance to do in Edmonton. And you know what? It is with the NDP that these bold ideas are going to be discussed, and I'm looking forward to it. Avi Lewis has done a tremendous job on this. He'll be there at our convention, and I'm looking forward to being part of that debate. I have been in the position of trying to reduce greenhouse gases. Every year that I was the Minister of the Environment, I managed to do that. We had big sectors like aluminum and pulp and paper, and you know what? We put in place a plan and we did it. For 20 years, Canada has done nothing but talk. We've been bluffing on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in this country. We've actually got one of the worst records in the world, going back to the previous Liberal government. And then the Conservatives didn't even believe the science of climate change. And now, although I welcome the change of tone from the new government, we've still got Stephen Harper's plans, Stephen Harper's timelines, and Stephen Harper's targets. Nothing's changed. So we're going to continue to fall short. Canada will not reduce its carbon footprint. We won't be reducing greenhouse gas emissions in this country. I'm very proud of Rachel Notley's NDP government in Alberta that has a bold plan to start bending that curve of greenhouse gas production. But more has to be done by the federal government because it is Canada that signed that deal in Paris, and we're falling way short. And you know what? The only way to move forward is to have the courage to have these big debates like we're going to be having in Edmonton on the LEAP Manifesto.
In which case, I don't want to trivialize this or make you sort of sum it up in an elevator pitch, but as you've been having your conversations with party members across the country, what is, in essence, the pitch you make to them for why they should endorse your leadership for another 4 years?
We've all fought in the NDP for over 50 years to reduce inequalities in our society, to create opportunity. That's what we've been about as social democrats. We know that a lot remains to be done. The economy's grown by 50% in the last generation, the last 30 years. None of that's found its way into the pockets of workers. Jobs that are being created today, Steve, are part-time, precarious, low-paid jobs. We're going to fight. We're going to fight to change that because more and more Canadians realize the deck is stacked against them. You know, the Panama Papers this week for tax havens, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We're the only ones who made this part of our platform to actually start going after tax havens. I asked Mr. Trudeau in the House just a couple of weeks ago when the KPMG scandal broke. Millionaires shipping illegally their money out of the country. When they finally got caught, they didn't have to pay a penny in interest, not one penny of penalty. Well, you know what? That's not fair. And I asked Mr. Trudeau if he thought that that was okay. He wouldn't even answer.
But Mr. Mulcair, when they say to you,
that's not something that we accept.
Okay, when you make that assertion, though, to party members across the country, and they say to you, Tom, we agree. That's the agenda. We got to go after that. We're just not sure you're the guy to lead us to that promised land. What's the follow-up?
Well, the follow-up is I am that person who's been fighting these fights. That's who I am. I do have that deep experience. They know that I have that passion. They know that I'm that fighter. They know that if they stand with me, that we're going to continue to lead these battles for a more fair society. The top 100 families in this country, top 100 individuals in terms of what they own, they control more wealth, 100 people, than the bottom 10 million Canadians. That is a completely skewed economy, and it's not enough to do like the Liberals do and just claim that there's equality of opportunity. We need the government playing an active role in removing those inequalities. That's where we come in, because we actually believe in that. We believe in universal social programs as a way of removing inequality in our society. The membership knows that we have that passion, that we're going to continue to lead that fight for generations to come. But for now, we've got 4 years ahead of us as opposition. They know we've got a great team there in Parliament, that we're going to lead those battles, we're going to hold this government to account, and we're going to define the issues going forward. And that's why I'm so heartened, Steve, by what I've heard across the country. I'm not taking anybody for granted. I'm not taking any result for granted. But I have met with thousands of members over the last 6 months, and I'm heartened by the level of support I feel, and I'm looking forward to meeting with and talking with that same base when we get to Edmonton this weekend.
To that end, I don't know if you had a chance to see Ian MacDonald's piece in iPolitics, but he advises you not to make the quote-unquote Joe Clark mistake, which is, of course, a reference to 1983, the PC convention that year. Joe Clark got 66.9%, decided that wasn't good enough, called a leadership convention. Brian Mulroney beat him 6 months later. Ian says that if Mulcair hits anywhere in the 60s, he should simply say, thanks very much, folks, have a safe trip home. Is that the plan?
My plan is to make sure that I get a solid endorsement from our membership in Edmonton.
What's solid
That's why
mean?
I've worked
What does solid
tirelessly.
mean?
Well, that's, there have been different numbers that have been put out there, but I'm going to respect the membership and I'm not going to give a number. I'm going to let them decide that, and I'll know after the weekend what that represents, the number that is put up there. Don't forget, this is actually a vote on whether or not there'll be a leadership race. So that's what our Constitution provides for. Anything beyond that, the members have to decide, and I'm going to be very respectful of them.
I have one last question for you, and I'm going to ask you to be as profound as possible considering the circumstances. There are moments when we all secretly have our doubts about whether we can do any particular job. And I want to know how you handle those moments when you ask yourself, I wonder if I truly am the right guy for this moment, for this party in our history.
Well, that's the question that the members are going to be asking over the weekend. And as I say, I'm heartened by the reaction I've gotten as I've gone across the country. I've always understood, since I began working in government many years ago, that there is one thing that we can do when we're elected that nobody else can do. We can actually change the rules of the game to help people. That's our priority in the NDP. That's what we're all about. We're the party that is there to make people's lives better, to stand up for the average working family. We're going to stand up against the Trans-Pacific Partnership because we know it'll destroy tens of thousands of good-paying Canadian jobs. But we're also going to fight the big fight to bring in proportional representation and to finally do something about our unfair electoral system other than just talk about it. And on climate change, we will be the only party with a credible plan to actually reduce greenhouse gases. I am the person who has been able to make that case so far. I hope to have the honor of continuing to serve our members. They're going to decide that this weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing them in Edmonton.
And we wish you well, Mr. Mulcair, and we thank you for spending so much time with us on TVO tonight. Thanks very much.
All the best, Steve. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.